Governor Kathy Hochul has set New York on a path of developing new nuclear power generation. So putting aside whether that is the right policy choice for the Empire State from a fiscal and environmental perspective, we wanted to consider what that rollout might look like. And to make sense of the next steps, including the regulatory burdens, we're checking in with Ekin Senlet, co-chair of the regulatory practice area for the law firm of Barclay Damon, and Paul Powers, who works on government relations for a subsidiary of the law firm, and they're both part of Barclay Damon's formalized nuclear energy team, which was founded in response to the governor's commitment to nuclear energy. So the formalization of your new nuclear energy team comes amid Governor Kathy Hochul's push to expand the state's nuclear footprint and capacity. I'm curious whether you think the governor has kicked off a sort of regulatory gold rush of sorts. And in addition, the operators who might be interested in running plants, obviously they might be interested in regulatory help navigating whatever sort of minefields might occur. But who else do you envision potentially working with during this possible expansion period?
When it comes to nuclear, it is not only the operator of the nuclear. It is a huge ecosystem we have to start thinking about. Also, we are seeing it everywhere in the United States as well. New York is not alone. It's happening everywhere in the United States as well as outside of the U.S. Just not the infrastructure itself. You're talking about workforce. You're talking about labor and employment. You're talking about how are we going to secure if there's a water need, if it is not an SMR. So it is a huge push. That's why I think the governor approached it as my blueprint, my nuclear reliability plan, rather than just building up one plant, because that's not what's needed, and it's going to take a lot.
But for regulatory experts like yourself, who do you envision coming to you, and what are the things that they're going to want help navigating? Because obviously the operators are going to want help with the PSC and every other state agency that they might have to touch. But are the other, say, connected industries going to have challenges as well that you envision could potentially solicit your services?
That's all of the above approach also goes with our services, and very similarly, in terms of not only legal, lobbying, work, education, it will come all of the above because it is going to be a big push for so many different areas. We have seen this in the offshore industry. When we started talking about offshore wind, it wasn't only the wind farms we were talking about. We were talking about labor and union, workforce, education, who is going to help this out, right? Help it out. When it comes to nuclear energy, I think it will first start with definitely the operators, but also all of the manufacturers. Your local hosting communities, they have to be part of it because the governor's office made it very clear. I am not going to put it somewhere that the nuclear energy is not wanted. So we need a big table for the discussions we're going to have for nuclear.
And we could get into emergency planning, for example. That takes a lot of coordination with the local communities and the state. And cybersecurity, physical security, those types of issues really weren't quite at the fore the last time that we tried to site a nuclear facility.
Which was 35 plus years ago?
Yes.
So is there anybody still around? I mean, Paul, you and I were talking offline, so you were in the assembly the last time this happened, but is there anybody who's got experience with this?
As far as what types of expertise?
Of putting in nuclear power in New York?
There probably isn't. It's going to be a first impression for most people involved, I think, yeah.
And what challenges does that create? Or is this just like siting offshore wind and you just need to account for that pesky, nuclear element too?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Somewhat right. Regulations are there, David.
Yeah.
It's not that regulations are gone. However, nothing has been permitted under the existing regulations. And I'm talking about state level at this point. NRC is obviously going through, for our listeners who they don't follow NRC, they are going through updating their regulations for faster site and plan approval for nuclear. So it's happening at the federal level. So federal level will go, they're trying to decrease it to 18 to 24 months. And then at the state level, in our books, we have regulations in terms of how to site and how to provide environmental permitting for nuclear plants. It's under our Article 10, Public Service Law under Article 10. There are a couple of specific exhibits for nuclear power plants. Have it been done before? Has it been done before? No. In that essence, it's a little bit similar to how we had to go through offshore wind. Industry is here. And we're just trying to make the existing regulations work for them.
Sure.
And then you will have the backplay. You will have going back and forth in terms of is it applicable or not.
Well, at the governor's direction, as part of this push that was expanded in the state of the state, the PSC is supposed to be launching a proceeding where stakeholders can provide input. What are some of the variables that people are going to be weighing in on as part of that process? What are some of the, I guess, for lack of a better word, fungible areas that there is wiggle room and where the regulators will be looking for input on how this process should take shape?
I think they have to do with land use,
Mm-hmm.
what type of sweeteners the developer wants to bring to the localities as far as, support for community initiatives. How are they going to be taxed? And they don't all come under the PSC's jurisdiction, but they all have to be dealt with by the developer. And they're all going to require guidance.
And when we talk about sweeteners, what about the idea that these operations are going to need some sort of state support to operate, to at least get off the ground? Is that a safe assumption? Is there any world in which these are built just by operators who see a vision for making money on their own?
Well, they could be associated with a data center.
Okay.
And so you could have a long-term off-taker that is willing to pay whatever price that comes out of, the process. And, like Kim said, this is not just a New York thing. And it really was visionary for the governor to come out with an additional 4,000 megawatts, I think, this January. But when you look at 4,000 megawatts is 1% of what the national goal is now, which is 400 gigawatts by 2050. This is going to be happening all over the country, and people will be seeing a lot of the information, coming to them from elsewhere too. How it's going there.
Are there already marriages of data centers and nuclear operators? The essential, you got my chocolate and my peanut butter, and your peanut
Yes.
butter and my chocolate. That's already coming together.
Yes, Meta, Amazon, quite a few of them. They're deals with SMRs, advanced technologies, mostly that haven't that haven't actually been
Built yet.
built
Yeah.
commercially. They're designed. They're going through licensing. Some of them have broken ground. Well, actually, just very few, but but these are aspirational deals that they've made, but they're solid deals.
The marriage between data center AI boom as well
Yeah.
as the nuclear renaissance is, it's real. And anytime, I guess, when you look at news, it will always follow each other. Obviously, it has something to do with the federal policy, right? We want to switch, we want energy independence. On the other hand, everyone is aware that is the big elephant in the room. We have shortage of energy and we need it fast. The question is whether nuclear will be fast enough. Quadrupled with the need that the data center is putting into the picture. We don't have that kind of energy. We don't have that kind of capacity, if that's the term that the ISOs use. So what do the data centers look? They are not going to slow down. So data centers and data center owners, the big ones, the Microsofts, Amazon, Google, Meta, they are looking at, can I just team up with a secure, reliable power? Who can it be and how fast can I move this along? So nuclear comes as a solution because there are some options outside of our conventional nuclear plants that are existing right now in New York. SMRs, that's one technology. Small modular reactors, which is a little faster. The technology is the same when it comes to how electricity is produced, but they do require less space, and they can be actually manufactured at their factory. Think about manufactured homes, and then it will be just dropped to wherever it's needed. So there are quite a bit of deals. 2025 was a banner year for these kind of deals, and 2026 it's going as fast as you can.
If I'm one of these marriages, though, is there a reason why I'm going to look at New York for my data center, given historically when it comes to anything with generation siting, transmission siting, the one thing you can count on is that it's going to take a while. So wouldn't I look elsewhere before I look to New York?
I think that's why we don't call about, say, North Country Dataway Center or Highway. We hear Virginia Highway, right? Virginia Data Center Highway. It's just that is the reason that you're right. It's not as a fast growing. It is happening. There are a lot of big proposals in New York as well. Nothing is really happening yet because they haven't really started constructing what they proposed. It is not as fast as it's happening down south, meaning in the PJM area, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland area. But what New York offers is actually a lot of incentives. We have a governor who wants it because data centers and the AI and digital world is where all the progress is, and we want it in. We want it in New York. How do you make that marriage? You pull them together and make sure that they have secure and reliable power.
Well, Paul, given your experience on the inside, both in the Assembly and the Public Service Commission, I'm curious what you think is some of the underrated challenges of the deployment of nuclear power. Because obviously there's the things that we're all familiar with, that we've seen, say, with offshore wind, and we've seen with maybe efforts to develop transmission. But are there things that you're maybe putting more stock into than people who only look at this from the outside, or maybe are just completely unfamiliar with the energy world, that you think, don't sleep on this as being a real problem?
Looking at the whole universe of the different issues that can arise when you're trying to develop something like this. First of all, you have to look at the environmental impacts, and that's going to differ from technology to technology. The footprints, the amount of water that's being used. If it's a traditional light water reactor, you're going to be using a lot of water. If it's a molten salt technology, you're not going to be using much water. How comfortable the locals are with hosting something new, the rollout of information and how that gets portrayed is going to be key here. I mean, around the state right now, we're looking at localities that are rebelling against the siting of battery facilities.
Sure.
The battery technology is amazing, but it's not nearly as complex as an advanced nuclear reactor.
Sure.
There's going to be pushbacks. There are going to be advocacies that are going to be pushing narratives that are going to make people nervous. And so I think that's kind of an obvious one. But beyond the environmental one, I think also there's so many, going back to data centers, and I think we're going to find the same thing with nuclear facilities. It's at a certain point, there's going to be all of these proposals out there. There's going to be potential developments here and there. How do you separate the wheat from the chaff? They're not all going to get built, right? It's going to make people somewhat nervous, and it's also going to make investors a little nervous. So they're going to have to work out through some of that as you go. And I think we saw the same thing with offshore wind.
With renewables and offshore wind, with other proposal, big infrastructure, big load interconnections to the grid. The term that's used is the ghost projects, right? Yes. Everyone comes up with the next big idea, and then they make a request to the ISO or to the utility, and then everyone wants to know, okay, you have great ideas. Is this a real project? Can I really put resources into it? Same thing will happen, I think. I agree with you on that one. Maybe not so much with the data centers, but the how are we going to get to 8 gigawatts if we get there with nuclear? How to realize which one is real, which one is not.
Right.
And after a quick break, we'll continue our conversation with Ekin Senlet and Paul Powers, who are members of the formalized nuclear team at the law firm of Barclay Damon. And for more Capital Press Room content, visit capitalpressroom.org or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. This is WCNY's The Capital Press Room, and we're continuing our conversation with Ekin Senlet and Paul Powers, who are members of the formalized nuclear energy team for the law firm of Barclay Damon, and we're talking about the path forward in New York now that Governor Kathy Hochul has set her sights on the development of new nuclear power generation. Well, we've gone 16 minutes now, and we haven't mentioned the legislature. And Paul, when you were mentioning the environment, the water, localities, when we talked about the data centers, these are all like red meat for the legislature. But to date, it seems like they're comfortable saying, hey, this is the governor's game. I'm just here to watch. Whatever she wants to do is great, aside from a handful of members who are really, really opposed to this. How are you guys thinking about the legislature? Do you think that they'll continue to be like in the passenger car of a motorcycle, just along for the ride, or do you anticipate they are a player that needs to be either addressed, needs to be placated, or can be just simply overrun?
For nuclear, I think we're in an odd political position. It's really a bipartisan effort at this point. The last Democratic administration and now the GOP administration in Washington, big supporters, and have pushed the nuclear agenda. I doubt there's going to be a lot of opposition conceptually to bring on more nuclear because of the emissions benefits, frankly, in New York. And also
what are
the
those
jobs.
emission benefits? Is it a zero emission product according to the state and the Public Service Commission?
It is.
Is it? They've
Yeah.
defined that. I thought we were still waiting.
That was the hope.
A dispatchable,
Yeah.
emissions free. Yeah. I don't know that they've actually included nuclear yet. That
Yet does a
proceeding
lot
is
of word there.
ongoing.
Yet does a lot of word there.
Yeah. But I think you understand what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
mean, they are, from an air standpoint, relatively benign. Unless on a local level there's a lot of opposition to introduce state legislation here. And it is regulated at the federal level, for the most part. With regard to data centers, there is a lot of interest right now,
Sure.
as you know. There was a hearing that the Assembly Energy Committee held last fall. They had Rory Christian, who's the chairman of the PSC, along with a whole bunch of other folks. They were very worried about how data centers might increase costs for other ratepayers. And so there's a real effort to have data centers bring their own power. And we actually saw in Washington this week the largest data users and folks who are going to be building these data centers. They've all kind of agreed conceptually that they will bring their own power. So from that standpoint, that takes the immediate wholesale market implications kind of off the table. They're going to bring their own power. But on the other hand, there's a finite set of resources to build power plants everywhere. So is it going to increase the cost of building generation technologies? There's a lot of interest on the part of the legislature, and we've seen bills to require the Public Service Commission come up with a single service classification for these large loads for data centers. We've seen just bills that basically said outright, no, you can't pass any data center interconnection costs on to other customers. Again, I don't know that that's the number one issue in the final analysis. The latest bill we have, and I think there was an op-ed that was written by the sponsors this morning, is a bill for a 3-year moratorium. I don't know how that gets worked out, whether it gets worked out in the budget, or whether there's, the governor is able to just kind of ignore that. And she has tasked the Public Service Commission to look at these issues, not only looking at, she calls it Energize New York. It was in her State of the State. So they're going to be looking at streamlining the interconnection of these large loads, but at the same time making sure they don't impose any costs on other customers. And that means they'll be looking at tariff structures. Right now, the utilities do impose interconnection costs on these large loads when they come on the system. But it's not all that cut and dry. These investments to accommodate new loads on the distribution and transmission system, they're lumpy. So
That's a technical term?
That's a technical term. So, they may or may not exactly match what kind of costs that these new loads are imposing. So,
a couple things there. The idea of action in the budget, is there any expectation that something needs to be done in this budget to advance the governor's nuclear plans, or can this all be done regulatorily, hard for me to say, regulatorily at this point?
There isn't a specific, item that the governor is looking. She did say what she wanted to say last year, 2025, as NYPA. 1 gigawatt, you are mandated to get this done. NYPA said, okay. Fast forward to this year, during the State of the State, she opted, not specifically for NYPA, for everyone, whoever is interested in New York, meaning nuclear, come to New York. We are welcoming you as long as we can site you reliably, safely, wherever you would like to be. What happens now is after Governor announced that she would like more nuclear power, there were a couple of conventions within the state, and it was by all of the executives, the chambers just attended these meetings, it's all about nuclear and how can we get the ecosystem ready. You're going to hear this term a lot. You're going to hear this term a lot in terms of, as I said, it's not only putting the wires or the nuclear plant. It's a lot comes to it, right? And it comes to education, workforce. Do we have enough people in these areas who can actually run a nuclear plant? We do have existing nuclear fleets in New York, but they are busy, right? We have to just come up with a different system to educate our younger people to get into this area so that there's enough workforce. At the same time, NYPA started an RFI asking individual stakeholders in terms of when it comes to host communities, tell us if you would like to host a nuclear plant. And the communities, I think it was 8 or 9 localities, these are counties in New York, came forward. They said,
some that already have
some already have. 2 of them already have. And they said, sign me up.
Yeah.
I am welcome. And then at the same time, operators and developers, or the partners, as NYPA calls it in the RFI, come forward. Tell us how you can help as we get into this adventure together. About 20-something entities also put their names in there, put their hat in the game. And now the RFP will come out. So it's a little bit all on the NYPA side when it comes to nuclear and moving forward. There is going to be a process before we get to, I think, when the legislative comes in. I think it will become, not this year, but within the next couple of years, we will have to see, all right, we have a plan. We know where it's going to be. What will be the siting regime? Are we going to go through our Article 10? Are we going to go through something else? Are we going to work very closely with NRC and let them handle most of the radiological effects of a nuclear plant? How can we streamline this? Because by the time we get to the end of it, we're talking about 10, 20 years.
Well, and that streamlining process seems important because, as you guys have pointed out, this is not a effort that is unique to New York. Everyone, or a lot of states around the country, are looking to build nuclear. So if we're not first out of the gate or early in this process, is there a possibility or a likelihood that these operators are going to be like, I don't have the capacity to build in New York. I'm already committed here, and we don't have the resources, the expertise, or access to the initial capital. So is there a case to be made that we are under a tight gun here, so to speak?
Absolutely. That's your supply chain issue. And there's a lot of demand.
And in terms of localities, is it the safe bet that this is going to end up, if it is developed, at least initially, like adjacent to one of our already existing upstate nuclear power plants where they are like begging to have more people working in these industries? Because it seems like that is the easiest way to go about doing this. And if we are trying to do things fast, let's go easy, right?
It is a bet. It's a speculation at the same point. All we know is the governor's initiative started as it is going to be in upstate.
Mm-hmm.
And upstate means a lot of different things to different people, right?
But definitely north of Westchester.
North of Westchester, exactly. And the counties that came forward, Broome County, Jefferson, Oswego, Sky. So these are the counties that kind of put their name in there.
Yeah.
In terms of where it's going to be, it's up to the RFP process.
Do you think we'll actually have new nuclear power built in New York in, say, the next 2 decades?
I do. If only, through the Department of Defense, they have a new program.
This is like the Fort Drum operation?
Yeah, so it could be at Fort Drum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
SMRs, likely, and it has to be. That's the other way of putting it. We don't have a lot of choices, and we are in an energy crisis. That's the reality of it.
There's a finite set of technologies at this point, and we could get lucky and maybe come up with nuclear fusion, which is limitless, right? But
doesn't actually exist in a practical form right now, right? I didn't miss something. Okay,
no.
Good.
But there are very ambitious goals even there. There are some companies that say that we want to have a commercial product in 4 years.
And I want to be 6 feet tall.
Yeah, I know.
Well, what is the timeline then that you're anticipating if there is some sort of private development outside of the Department of War perspective? You like that?
Sorry.
No. I just felt like getting a laugh out of that one. Outside of the Department of Defense, what is the timeline that you think actually makes sense? Because obviously the governor would like to see this done ASAP, but even in the best of circumstances, when do we start getting, or when do the data centers start getting nuclear power, new nuclear power?
Again,
10 years from now?
Oh no, I think
5 years from now?
I think you're already seeing construction, but not on the nuclear side. But in some sites, they've already started the balance of plant construction, basically the steam side, right?
In New York?
Not in New York. No.
Oh, but yeah, but I'm
Sorry,
thinking
sorry.
New York. When is the earliest you think it could happen in New York, if it does happen?
So let me get my crystal ball.
Yes.
I'll put it right here.
Yes.
What will it say?
Well, I think you have the NYPA. Basically, the NYPA process is underway.
Uh-huh.
I think we're going to know more about what the time frame is for their project very soon. I would say this year, don't you think? I mean, they'll come out with an
RFP. Will come out, yeah.
And then it may be another year or two before we know, who wins that.
Will those proposals have to outline a timeline for what they think, could potentially
yes.
break ground and then
Yeah.
get the atoms breaking apart?
And it depends. If it's new technology, it's going to take longer. But it's an interesting balance because with newer technology, there's higher risk from an investment standpoint, but the amount of risk, it's lower because it's just a lower, it's not as much power. But, you do have conventional reactors that can be built. And, we have a company in New York that already is running our 4 nuclear facilities. I'm sure that they're more than willing to think about, sponsoring a conventional light water reactor that could be sited fairly quickly.
What's fairly quickly in New York standards? You got to translate that for me.
Well, it's more of the NRC than New York.
Will the next Winter Olympics have happened already?
You have no, but you have to look at the what's happening at the NRC and at the federal level right now. The president signed 4 executive orders last July. Was it July or last summer?
It started with actually the day of the taking office with nuclear power, and then.
But the idea is that he's got a new NRC chair. They are committed to issuing licenses quickly, and the DOE is behind that 100%. The first new nukes will be DOE projects, either DOE or Department of War Defense projects. And then, but you'll see on the commercial side, once those are in, like you say, crystal ball is to how fast it gets done in New York. But as long as NYPA is making progress, putting these plans together, it could be easily within 10 years. 5 years would be outrageous, but, easily within 10, I think.
Well, Ekin, Paul, thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Always
you.
save it.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.